With the recent release of Kung Fu Panda 4, hype for the series is through the roof once again. So we hope you're ready for an important lesson in martial arts history and panda history. I'm Kifinosi with Wicked Binge, and you're in for a treat. This is the Kung Fu Panda timeline, a recap of a legend most awesome. Bodacious, even. While we're mainly focusing on the movies today, there are also some short films and even a few bits of lore from spin-offs that'll be brought up when it's relevant, so kick back, grab a snack, or 10, and get ready to hear the legends of the Kung Fu Panda. But before we get to the panda part, we have to get to the Kung Fu part, and to get to that, we have to talk about Oogway and Kai. For this first section, we have to go way back about 500 years before the present, by which we mean the present in the movies. Master Oogway hardly needs any introduction. He lived in the mortal realm for thousands of years, and while he's most well known for his infinite wisdom and invention of Kung Fu, he was also a powerful warrior in his younger years, and right beside him was his closest friend, Kai. Despite his status as a series villain, Kai was once a good guy, or at least a good friend. When Oogway was wounded in battle, Kai carried him for days through all sorts of extreme weather and harsh terrain to find him healing, which ultimately came from a panda village. These kind pandas used their chi to heal Oogway and even taught him and Kai how to give chi to others. Unfortunately, Kai was blinded by the potential of this newfound power, and he was more interested in the other end of the spectrum. Kai wanted to take the panda's chi to gain power for himself, which prompted Oogway to stop his old friend and start a battle that shook the earth. Ultimately, Oogway prevailed, banishing Kai to the spirit realm and warning future masters through a scroll that they would need a true master of chi to stop him if he were to ever return from the spirit realm, which thankfully wouldn't be for another 500 years. In the meantime, it was time for Oogway to find inner peace after this tragedy, which would lead to the birth of Kung Fu. Through world travels, meditation, inner peace, and probably 1,000 other wisdom-related concepts, Oogway created the martial art of Kung Fu a few hundred years after Kai's banishment. He would go on to share his wisdom and skills with future generations for many years, including Master Storming Ox, Master Croc, Master Thundering Rhino, and most notably, Master Shifu. Through Kung Fu, Master Oogway was able to establish a peaceful valley fittingly called the Valley of Peace. It was protected by those who possessed good hearts and adhered to Oogway's wisdom, overseen by him and his students in the Jade Palace. Oogway always saw the potential in his students, both good and bad. He could see whether a student with good surface level attributes would go corrupt or not, as well as whether one who seemed weak, unlikely, or immoral would wind up becoming something great. Given Oogway's strong belief in destiny, there are no accidents after all.
There are no accidents.
It's likely that this intuition of his stems from his own experience with Kai. Good or bad, potential was never missed by Oogway. That's why he invented Kung Fu, and the Dragon Scroll alongside the Dragon Warrior legend, which motivated Kung Fu students to become the best versions of themselves. But to properly use that motivation, he'd need some successors to share his wisdom with future generations. So with that, we now move on to a more imperfect master, Master Shifu. Easily one of the best characters in the series, Shifu is best known as the mentor who trains students to protect the Valley of Peace and potentially become the Dragon Warrior. But unlike Oogway, his origins aren't exactly epic, nor is his heart so perfectly pure. To talk about Shifu, we have to address the Nickelodeon cartoon Kung Fu Panda Legends of Awesomeness, which, among other things, expanded on Shifu's background. His father, Shyr, was a con man who regularly enlisted his son's help to sell phony artifacts to villages before naturally being kicked out of them. When Shifu was about 12 years old, he was left at the Jade Palace by his father. For all of his crummy parenting, Shyr sincerely wanted Shifu to have a happy life and a better father figure, neither of which he could provide for him. As such, Oogway took Shifu in and became his mentor, both spiritually and physically, and even sort of a father figure. For all Shifu's brokenness and pessimism, Oogway always supported and believed in him, which helped Shifu himself do the same for future warriors. But while this would lead to plenty of good, it would also have some tragic consequences. Yeah, it was inevitable. Grab your tissues, because next is the tragic tale of Tai Lung. Having been left on the Jade Palace's doorstep himself as a child, Shifu naturally took Tai Lung into his care when he found him there as a cub. He raised him as his own son, showing that Shifu's own tortured soul had somewhat healed and that he had still developed a sort of fatherly compassion. Further still, Tai Lung loved Kung Fu, and he was talented at it, so Shifu trained him to become the Dragon Warrior. Day and night, Shifu trained his son with discipline and love, all while promising him greatness as the Dragon Warrior. So, imagine Tai Lung's frustration when Shifu ultimately turned him down. Seeing darkness in his heart, Master Master Oogway advised Shifu not to give him the Dragon Scroll after all. This causes Tai Lung to go on a rampage through the Valley of Peace, effectively proving Oogway right about his heart, despite his anger being understandable. Tai Lung would be arrested for years following this, changing Shifu into a more detached, closed-off person, and all but ensuring that he'd never get emotionally attached to any of his students again. We see this through his training of Tigress as a cub, whom he showed none of the same parental affection or pride he showed to Tai Lung, at least not until later on. And if you thought the sad stuff was done, think again. It's time to talk about what we'll call the Peacock Panda Massacre. Long ago, the Peacock family ruled over Gongmen City due to their wealth and fame that came from the invention of fireworks. For some inexplicable reason though, the heir to the throne, Lord Shen, wasn't impressed by the beauty of fireworks alongside his wealth and high status. No, Shen wanted, I'm not even sure actually. What we are sure of is that he wanted to weaponize fireworks. In a very Oogway and Tai Lung-esque interaction, a seer warned Shen's parents that a warrior of black and white would eventually take Shen down. Unfortunately, this didn't lead to Shen working to address his faults and becoming better. Rather, he used his authority as prince to raid a local panda village, killing every single one he could find in it. If they weren't killed, they were forcibly pushed out into their own secret panda village. Having disgraced his parents, Shen was banished from the city, and while this is far from the last we'll see of this firework-themed fiend, we'll get to that later. It's finally time to get to the titular animals themselves. This is the story of Po Ping. Going back to the traumatic panda massacre, Po was saved only through an act of sacrifice by his mother, who's unnamed to this day. The only name she needs, though, is Hero. As Po's father, Li, held off Shen and his army the best that he could, she hid Po far from the carnage and used herself as bait to get the attackers far away from Po, tragically losing her life in the process. But little Po wouldn't be an orphan forever. Thankfully, he found himself at Mr. Ping's noodle shop in a crate of radishes. This kind-hearted noodle-slinging goose fed him, bathed him, and most importantly, adopted him. This ensured that Po would be well-fed and well-raised because Mr. Ping loves his boy more than anything, probably even noodles, but we won't speak for him on such a hard decision.
We are noodle folk. Broth runs through our veins.
Finally, there's one more central character origin story we have to talk about. The Furious Five, baby! Starting with Tigress. As suggested from her story of Shifu's past in the first movie, you'd be right to assume that Tigress was the first member of the Furious Five to find their way into the Jade Palace. As a young cub, Tigress lived at the Baogu orphanage, where she was feared for her seemingly uncontrollable strength. Uncontrollable, that is, until Master Shifu came to help train her to have greater control. With his help, Tigress was able to have a happy, peaceful life at the orphanage, until Shifu himself decided to adopt her himself, seeing great potential in her. That's not to say that Tigress had an easy ride from here on out, though. Shifu was far from the most affectionate parental figure she could have asked for. She struggled to gain his approval and pride from a young age, which only made her more determined to adhere to his training. This gradually went from Tigress learning self-control to her becoming insecure over her inability to be like her master.
I'll never be like him.
But opportunity would indeed strike one day. Let's head back to the noodle shop during Po's teen years. The short film Secrets of the Scroll tells a story of how, through a series of non-accidents, Tigress ends up recruiting the Furious Five. Here's what happens. Mr. Ping jokingly suggests all sorts of wild things Po could do with his life. These include being a cleaner, a comedian, a dancer, and a doctor. Po loses the scroll he writes this on, and as if that weren't clumsy enough, he sneezes in a meal to be eaten by Master Shifu. By the way, shouldn't the servant who picked it up be blamed for not calling him on that? Anyway, Shifu gets super sick as a result and is unable to protect the Valley of Peace from the Boar, a villain who's on a rampage. He gives Tigress a scroll with 4 warriors to be gathered to protect the valley. But when Tigress drops the scroll down a flight of stairs, she picks it up, or so she thinks. In actuality, she picks up Po's scroll of career brainstorming ideas. And so, instead of 4 more, essentially Shifu clones, she would end up picking up some warriors who fit the descriptions on that scroll. That leads us into the remaining Furious Five members. We'll go in order, starting with Mantis. Mantis is unique among the other 4, the Furious Five, in that he was actually a hero before joining the team. When friends big or small needed help, they could count on Mantis's lightning-fast speed and shocking power to get them out of a pinch. His main weakness was his impatience, which often led to him failing to listen to the instructions of said friends. On one occasion, he gets kidnapped by a band of gators, at which point he's forced to foster some patience, leading ultimately to him playing dead so he could attack them at the moment they open his cage to check on him. As Mantis grew older, he kept using his skills to help others, and these skills would grow over time to cover other areas. The most notable we've seen is acupuncture. You might remember him using it to help Po relax after a tough day of training, but when Shifu was given food poisoning poisoning, Mantis was the doctor in question who helped him feel better. Well, it turned out that Mantis wasn't a doctor, and he also hit Shifu in the eyeball with a mace at one point, but, I mean, hey, he meant well, right? They really should ask for some medical paperwork before hiring a doctor, though. Next was a cleaner, and that bill was fit by the only member who has a bill, the gentle-hearted janitor, Crane. At the Lida Kung Fu Academy, Crane worked as a janitor who was said to work even harder than the students therein. Appreciate your janitors, kids. They don't have it easy. And although many didn't appreciate his skills, Mei Ling, the top student at the time, encouraged Crane to use his talents to try out as a new student. So Crane doubled down on his already hard work by adding some physical strength training in his downtime. He ultimately passed the test despite the lack of good faith from most of his peers, and so Crane's status as a janitor was upgraded to a Kung Fu student, and still a janitor. Yeah, when Crane is picked up by Tigress, he's still working as a cleaner, though seemingly at a different school this time. But the only things he'd be needing to clean going forward would be the acts of his opponents. Got him. Once Tigress picks him up, we see Crane take his role as a great support to the Five, often giving them transport and a quick escape when they need it. This next entry is not to be confused with the banana. That's our monkey! That went over poorly, didn't it? Well, don't worry, it wasn't a hit when the up-and-coming comedian Monkey was first trying out his act, but it's a lot better than how he used to be, at least. Monkey, to put it simply, used to be the town prankster, and his tricks often went beyond fun jokes into near-bullying territory. It's just a prank, bro. Well, it takes a stern talking to and pranking from Master Oogway for Monkey to realize he needs to change his ways. It turns out this mischievous streak was because of his own trauma of being treated as a laughingstock in his childhood. Monkey would then change his tune and become a friendly helper, from everything to carrying old ladies down long flights of stairs to stopping crime wherever he saw it. Truly chaotic good in its purest form. Later he'd be scouted by Tigress as what he didn't know would be his spot in the Furious Five. That leaves us with just one more, and she might have the sweetest origin story of the bunch. Viper. Viper was born to the legendary Grand Master Viper, their home village's famed warrior who protected them from all sorts of threats with his venomous fangs. Viper's birth made him proud to crown an eventual successor to his legacy, except for just one problem. Viper didn't have fangs. This troubled the Grand Master. Don't get us wrong, he loved his daughter, but the fact is that he was getting old. When he was out of commission, would the village be left without a protector? Well, no, it turns out Viper was just as capable as her old man in her own way. She didn't fight with venom though, rather with her skill at ribbon dancing, which, quite wholesomely, she learned just to make her dad smile. When the Grandmaster broke his fangs in battle, Viper rushed over to save him and proved herself capable of making smiles and taking them, when they got too smug, of course. Viper would become the dancer of Tigress's ragtag team, and her father's prideful, tearful goodbye was certainly not helping Tigress's own insecurity over her father figure's potential disappointment in her. But anyway, at least that story has a happy ending. Now we move on to the Furious Five's formation. Determined to protect the valley and make her master proud, Tigress stood firm against the boar and learned firsthand that Shifu's style of kung fu didn't work for her. Thankfully, her new friends swooped in to help her out. Crane and Viper saved her from getting annihilated at the last second, while Monkey and Mantis focused primarily on absolutely beating the snot out of the boar, and while Shifu may not have shown it too blatantly, he was bursting with pride at this. Training resumed right away, not just for Tigress, but for all of her friends. This was the first moment that really forced Master Shifu to accept that different fighters would need to use different styles to be the best version of themselves they could be, which, as we know, is exactly what being the Dragon Warrior means. So the Jade Palace was upgraded to fit each character's training, and the Furious Five became renowned for being the great warriors who protected the Valley of Peace whenever it was needed. Little did they know that in just a little while they would have a new buddy among their ranks. That's right, we're finally moving into the movie's main storyline, of course beginning with the Dragon Warrior. And really, it shouldn't take much critical thought to decide who's earned the Dragon Warrior role by now. I mean, Tigress has been training with Shifu for years now, probably decades even. She and the Five managed to protect the valley from threats that intimidated even Shifu on occasion, and who knows, maybe Shifu himself would be crowned the Dragon Warrior. So, imagine the surprise of absolutely everyone when Po, a pudgy kung fu fanboy, is chosen as the new Dragon Warrior.
What? What?
What? Heck, he straight up landed there by accident. But Oogway chose him, and like he says, there are no accidents, right? This first entry in the cinematic saga sees the start of Po finding his place at the Jade Palace, and as Oogway accepts his transition to the spirit realm, Shifu's left with quite the project on his hands. Throughout the movie, Po slowly but surely masters kung fu in his own way. Shifu uses food as motivation for him, causing him to fight more fiercely and learn how to protect the Valley of Peace. It's not a quick process, of course. Po would slowly but surely, again, learn to harness his full potential over the course of the first 3 movies, movies. In this first movie, both Po and Shifu cement acceptance of their respective destinies through the defeat of Tai Lung, who's escaped from prison. Shifu's finally able to apologize to Tai Lung for the pain he put him through, and Po ultimately takes him down and gains both the Valley and the Five's approval as the new Dragon Warrior. Even Tigress, who initially had the least faith in him. Now it's time for the next step on Po's journey, Po versus Shen, and trauma. When Lord Shen returns to Gongmen City to reclaim his throne, Po is left to take him down. But a certain emblem on Shen keeps him from doing so. Po is forced to face his past trauma, learning what Shen and his army did to the pandas, and more personally to Po's own mother and father. After accepting his past with the help of a kind-hearted seer, Po is able to finally obtain inner peace and fight without burden. We even see Po offer Shen mercy near the end of their fight, showing that he's truly been able to overcome his trauma at the Peacock's hands. Wings.
You gotta let go of that stuff from the past, because it just doesn't matter.
Shen refuses though, and so Po manages to redirect not a mere droplet of water, but a ball of fireworks at Shen to defeat him. This explosive finale could have easily been the climax of our boy's character arc, but Po himself still wasn't entirely sure how to identify himself. So to bring Po's Dragon Warrior growth full circle, we finally move to the third movie, Po vs. Kai. At the end of Kung Fu Panda 2, Po's biological father comes to a sudden epiphany that his son is alive, which in the next movie is revealed to be a message from Master Oogway. Speaking of Oogway, he's finally back in a major role, but it's not the most admirable one, as his chi is stolen from Kai, who wants revenge on him, and to finally, after 500 years, take over the mortal realm. But being the super chill sensei he is, Oogway calmly tells Kai that he's set another warrior on the path to defeat him.
It was never my destiny to stop you.
Speaking of said warrior, Po ends up reuniting with his birth father and the rest of his extended family, and when his newfound BFF Tigress warns him of Kai and the danger he poses, Po starts to finally learn how to teach others Kung Fu, specifically his family, using training methods that fit each of their unique talents. Finally, he ends up defeating Kai, not by taking away his chi, mind you, but by absolutely bursting him with way more of it than he could handle. After all these trials and tribulations, it's safe to say that Po has earned his title as the Dragon Warrior, and the new spiritual mentor. While in the spirit realm after defeating Kai, Oogway reveals to Po the reason he chose him as the Dragon Warrior. He saw the future and the past of Kung Fu, and Po was the one who could unite them. Take Shifu for instance. While he's no doubt a brilliant master, he was also stuck in his ways, and it took a lot for him to even consider changing them. Po, on the other hand, had to learn Kung Fu in very different ways in order to succeed, and given that he made formidable warriors out of a tribe of silly, pudgy pandas, it takes very little thought to figure out why Oogway was willing to pass down his staff to Po. Though we are curious as to just how much bigger the other one he supposedly has is, but maybe that's a question for the next movie to answer. Speaking of which though, we're getting into Kung Fu Panda 4 spoilers now, so feel free to come back later if you haven't seen the movie. Our final section begins with the selection of the next Dragon Warrior. Kung Fu Panda 4 sees Po being told that it's time for him to start thinking about the next Dragon Warrior. In an epic twist that literally anyone who watched the trailers could have seen coming. I'm not even sure we needed to put a spoiler warning here. A new character named Shen is who Po chooses for this purpose. Raised by the chameleon from a young age due to her skills at theft and deception, this fox betrays Po's trust and his good nature at first, but ultimately she decides to redeem herself and do the right thing, no longer wanting to work for the chameleon. Being the sweetheart that he is, Po is willing to give Shen another chance. During the final battle with the chameleon, Po even delays escaping his cage to give Shen a chance to show off her skills. Much to Shifu's hesitation, Po is proud to give his new friend/apprentice a chance at training as the Dragon Warrior. And considering jail for multiple thefts was her other option, it's not hard to see why she'd accept this. For the grand finale, we've got to talk about the potential redemption of Po's foes. After the chameleon is defeated, the Kung Fu powers she stole from all the defeated Kung Fu masters in the spirit realm are returned to their hosts. Considering these masters included Tai Lung, Shen, and Kai, you might expect there to be some more conflicts between them, but after having their essence saved by Po, they're actually pretty grateful. Tai Lung bows in respect to his former nemesis, thanking him for saving their butts and accepting his return to the spirit realm, with Chameleon in tow. We've got to wonder, is this the last we'll see of Tai Lung? Maybe he'll return to train alongside Po and Shen. Maybe hearing some wise words from Oogway has changed that heart of his. Heck, maybe even the other villains could find some of that coveted inner peace. Not everyone can be the Dragon Warrior, but everyone can change into a better version of themselves, which really is what these movies are all about. But if you want more about the potential future of Kung Fu, we've got a video for you. Oh yeah. In the meantime, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, stay wickedly awesome!